Alright everyone, it is Finn here and welcome to my Afcon qualifier predictions. Now of course it's been a seriously long time since round 1 and 2 of the qualifiers, but of course about 9 months later we are finally back for round 3. Woo! Yeah baby! And of course, as we have quite a lot of African games to talk about, we might as well jump straight into things. But of course, let me not forget to remind you that of course, talking about missing things, make sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure not to miss the subscribe button if you do enjoy this kind of content. Once again, I love doing African football related videos, so of course, if you do enjoy watching it, make sure to hit subscribe to watch more in the future. But looking at our first set of games for round 3 of the qualifier predictions, we have Benin versus Rwanda. Now of course, this is 4th versus 3rd in their group, so of course, a lot is on the line and there's a lot of pressure for these two teams. Now of course I will say neither of these two teams have been remarkable, but looking at Benin, I do feel like the losses they've had in their group have been bigger than Rwanda. Along with that, I mean that game versus Senegal receiving a hat-trick versus Sadio Mane.
He's the best football player in the world.
Once again just sunk them a little bit deeper. Once again, neither of these two teams remarkable, but if they did have to be a winner, I would go for Rwanda with a 1-0 win. Now of course I do want to give you guys a tiny bit of a warning that I know the African Nation Championship happened about a month or 2 ago, but as those squads are completely different, as they only use domestic players, I probably won't be referring to the championship because the teams are completely different. But of course, jumping into our second game, we have Sierra Leone versus Tome and Principe. Now of course, look at Sierra Leone, I feel like they have to be the outright favourites, which is why I am going to give them a 2-0 win. Obviously, I mean, although they are also 3rd in their group, we saw them in African Cup of Nations about a year or 2 ago, and they were absolutely brilliant. And of course, on top of that, Sao Tome and Principe is the lowest ranked African nation in the Afcon qualifiers. So of course, if you compare those two teams on paper, I do think Sierra Leone are the better team. Although saying that, once again, football is a weird thing. It's not played on paper, it's played on the pitch. Now, jumping into our next game, we have Madagascar versus Central African Republic. Now, once again, Central African Republic, I feel like always has potential to be a really good team, but they never really play to their strengths, considering how good their players are. Of course, once again, it's 4th versus 3rd in their group, so it's hard to say. Looking at, I think it was the likes of Madagascar were crushed 3-0 versus Ghana, unfortunately, which, considering the fact that Central African Republic at least drew to Ghana, a very top African nation, I think that will be the difference maker for me. What teams like this do versus very top opposition, and that is why I think I'm going to go for African Republic with a 1-0 win. Once again, some of these games aren't easy, but you know what, you have to choose someone at least. But of course, jumping on to our next game, it is Congo versus South Sudan. Once again, as a lot of these games, it is kind of going to be 3rd versus 4th, where at least this time around Congo is 2-0. Now, I would like to give Congo points here. I do feel like they are a nation with some really strong players, but they recently lost 4-0 to Mali. Well, I mean, I say recently, it has been 9 months since then. But once again, showing defensively that maybe they aren't at the level they need to be. But saying that South Sudan also haven't been where they need to be defensively. So this could be a seriously close game. Once again, although Congo are slightly higher up on the table, I do think this is going to be our first draw of the video with a 0-0 draw. Now, heading into our next game, we have Zambia versus Lesotho. Now, of course, I always want Southern African teams to do extremely well, but there's just something about Zambia that really gets me excited.
What do you mean by that?
Of course, I'm still really sad about the fact that Mwepu doesn't play football anymore. I thought he was an absolutely brilliant footballer. But they still have the likes of Patson Daka, who's an absolutely brilliant striker. And versus Lesotho, I do prefer Zambia's chances, especially considering the fact that Lesotho is one of only 3 teams in the qualifiers left that hasn't scored a single goal in their first 2 games. Because of that, Zambia have to be the obvious favourites, and I am going to give them a 1-0 win.
You're joking. Not another one?
Now, of course, talk about obvious favourites. Next up, we've got Ghana versus Angola. And as much as I really like Angolan football at the moment, and I really do see growth in the nation at the moment, there's just something about Ghana, it just has to go to them. As we know, this Black Stars national team is absolutely brilliant. They can score goals when they want. They can be defensively brilliant, obviously at the World Cup, although they didn't advance out of the group. They were absolutely brilliant versus some very top opposition. I'm very excited to see what Chris Hughton does as new head coach of Ghana, once again, a manager with Premier League experience. And I do feel like he could do something very, very special here. Once again, Ghana, hopefully they do something special, and I think they're going to pick up I'm going to go for a 3-1 win, our highest scoring game yet. Now, heading on to our next game, we've got Gabon versus Sudan. Once again, looking at Gabon, they were a nation in the African Cup of Nations that lost a lot of top quality players, especially due to COVID. And as we know now, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang has retired from national football, which saying that, even at Afcon without a player like him, I still thought Gabon were brilliant. I mean, they actually had potential the way they were playing to go all the way in that competition. And because of that versus South Sudan, I do think Gabon could continue their form, and I'm going to put a 1-0 win. Now, heading on to Algeria versus Niger next. Once again, a game that could potentially be very close. As you know, Algeria absolutely packed with superstars. They are currently number 1 in their group, and they've just apparently signed the likes of Aya in their midfield. Although, once again, I don't think he'll be playing this round of Afcon qualifiers, maybe only at a later stage. But saying that, I do think Algeria will get the points here. Once again, absolutely brilliant squad, and although Niger very good on the attacking front from time to time, I do think Algeria will take this one, and I do think it will be a 2-1 win. Now, heading on to our next game, we've got the DRC versus Mauritania, which once again, although DRC, historically are a better footballing nation than Mauritania, they've had a very poor spell over the last few years. Over the last decade, the kind of players that have played for the DRC, or at least the kind of players they could have had at the DRC, considering the fact that, let's be honest, they haven't achieved anything, I am worried about them. Especially looking at Mauritania, at least they qualified for the recent Afcon. Because of this, I do feel like it is a game that could potentially be a lot closer than it could be. Looking at DRC, the only player that I really think is one to watch is the likes of Visa, the Brentford attacker. But other than that, once again, it could be very close, and I am going to go for a 1-0 win in Mauritania's defense. Now, heading into our next game, we've got Uganda versus Tanzania. Once again, two other top footballing nations. It could go either way, although 4th and 3rd in their group. Obviously, both nations very similar at the moment. Both lost 2-0 to Algeria, and both drew 1-1 with Niger.
We're not so different, you and I.
Once again, both very similar at the moment, and I feel like because of that, you have to go with a 1-1 draw. Now, of course, a game that I don't think will be a draw, we've got Ivory Coast versus Comoros Islands next. And of course, the likes of Sebastian Haller is back at playing football, and he could be a huge difference maker for Qualifier over Comoros. Although saying that, as we realized in the recent African Cup of Nations, Comoros Islands are not a nation to underestimate. Versus nations like Ghana, for example, they were absolutely gigantic, even Morocco. This is a nation that could surprise many, many people, but versus a very top quality Ivory Coast team, I do think they'll lose, as I do think Ivory Coast will win. I'm going to go 3-1 here. I feel like there could be a lot of firepower for Ivory Coast. Now, jumping into our next game, it is going to be Cape Verde versus Eswatini, which, looking at the likes of Eswatini, I feel like, once again, I would like for them to surprise. Obviously, love Southern African nations, as I am from South Africa myself. But once again, looking at Cape Verde, I do feel like looking at them in the recent African Cup of Nations, once again, they really proved their strengths, and I do feel like on the possession basis, in their last 2 games, they've had the majority of possession in their first 2 games of the qualifiers. Therefore, they showed that maybe they have potential to dominate a game like this, could be very, very close, and I do think they'll take it 1-0. Now, of course, I know a lot of the games I've mentioned so far have been very, very low scoring, but that's about to change. Just next up, we have Nigeria. Now, of course, look at Nigeria versus Guinea-Bissau. Nigeria, in their first 2 games of the qualifiers, have scored 12 goals. That's an average of 6 goals a game. Absolutely mental. And with arguably one of the best strikers in world football at the moment, with Victor Osimhen, once again, I feel like goals could come in an absolute flood in a game like this. Don't get me wrong, I think Guinea-Bissau are a decent team. Obviously, they are 2nd place in the group. But looking at how absolutely boss-like the Super Eagles have been, I do think Nigeria will get another very flattering scoreline. Maybe not as strong as the other ones, as I do think it will be a 3-0 win. Once again, it has potential to be a lot more, and it could be 4-5-0. Who knows? But of course, that takes us on to my nation next, with South Africa versus Liberia. Now, of course, I do like this. Well, actually, do I like this Liberia team? No, to be honest, I like the South African team. I feel like over recent years, I feel like we've kind of been sticked up with the kind of opposition we've gotten in qualifiers. Obviously, we didn't qualify for the last tournament due to the fact that we played Ghana in the previous stages. But versus a nation like Liberia, I do think South Africa have a chance. I'm especially excited to see the likes of Lyle Foster from Burnley in this team, to see what he's able to achieve. Once again, I'm happy that a big name is out there in European football at the moment, and especially versus a Liberian team that, once again, although they have ability, 0 goals as well. As I said, one of 3 nations to score 0 goals so far, and if there's any nation that South Africa should beat right now, it is them. Please come on, Bafana Bafana, I know we can do it. Now, heading into our next set of games, we've got Mali versus the Gambia next. Now, once again, looking at Mali, they've got some absolutely fantastic players in their squad at the moment. But saying that, once again, Gambia really showed in the recent African Cup of Nations that they can also hold a lot of surprises. One thing that does worry me, though, on Gambia's behalf is the fact that Mali have scored 7 goals in their first 2 games. Along with that, they've only conceded 1 goal. So in attack and defense, they've been super solid. Looking at Gambia, once again, they haven't played a single game of football in over 9 months now. They haven't been playing friendlies or absolutely anything, so they might be a tiny bit rusty. And of course, looking at stats like that, I have to give the win to Mali, and I am going to give them a 2-0 win. Once again, I would like for Gambia to surprise here. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, jumping into our next game, we've got Equatorial Guinea versus Botswana. Once again, looking at Equatorial Guinea, they are one of those nations on the day. They can be either really good or really bad.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
They are very unpredictable like that, but especially versus the Botswana team, who is the final team out of the 3 to have not scored a single goal so far in qualifiers. I do think if there's any team that Equatorial Guinea should score against here, it is going to be them. I mean, we saw them at Afcon versus nations like Ivory Coast. They have the ability to be super solid, which is why in this case, I'm going to give them a 2-0 win. Now, of course, referring a lot to the recent African Cup of Nations, we now have the previous winners of Afcon with Senegal versus Mozambique. Now, of course, we saw in that recent tournament, the likes of Senegal really did struggle to score. And looking at them at the moment, they've got a lot of players who are struggling with form. With the likes of Koulibaly at Chelsea, the likes of Mendy is not even starting for them. The likes of Sadio Mane is still returning from injury. This could be a very crucial game for a team like Senegal, but versus Mozambique once again, I still like their chances. Although Mozambique could cause a surprise here, I do feel like on paper and hopefully on the pitch, Senegal are the stronger team, and I am going to give them a 1-0 win. I do feel like it has potential to be a lot closer than it should be. Now, of course, talking about things being very close at the moment, it is Egypt versus Mali, which I know I said it is close, and I know a lot of people wouldn't perceive it to be close, but looking at Egypt, they are currently rock bottom of their group, which considering they've got a player who almost won the Ballon d'Or for them, that is absolutely shocking. Saying that, I don't think Mo Salah played any of their 2 recent qualifiers. I think he is in this team, so hopefully he should be playing this time around because a player like him is the difference maker. As we know, Egypt historically is the best nation in Africa in terms of Afcon competitions, and they should dominate this one. But versus a Mali team who, let's be honest, can steal the tricky point here and there and are a very well-rounded team, I feel like I keep on saying Mali. I do feel like Malawi could be very strong here. In fact, I do think it could be a 1-1 draw. And that's exactly what I'm going with. I don't think we should underestimate the power of Malawi. Now, heading into our next game, it is Burkina Faso versus Togo. Now, once again, I do kind of have a soft spot for this Togo team. I do feel like they always have superstars in this team, at least here and there. But versus Burkina Faso, who do have Bertrand Traoré up front, who was brilliant at Afcon, although maybe domestically has been brilliant this season. They've still got they've still got Tapsoba as a centre-back. They've still got Kofi as a goalkeeper. This is a very well-rounded team, and I am going to give Faso a 2-0 win. Now, jumping into one of our final games of this round, we have Tunisia versus Libya. Once again, looking at Tunisia, you cannot underestimate a team that beat France at the World Cup. Eventual finalists, previous winners of the tournaments as a whole, Tunisia absolutely shocked the world. And versus a team like Libya, once again, I do feel like they will show their strengths. And once again, if all their best players are match fit, it should be a very comfortable 2-0 win. Now, of course, jumping into our second final game, which, of course, don't forget, guys, if you have enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe down below, as I do enjoy making it, and hopefully you guys enjoy watching it. Let's see if we can get to 10,000 subscribers very soon. But, of course, jumping into our next game, we have Cameroon versus Namibia. Now, once again, as a Southern African, I would love for Namibia to do well. But this is a Cameroonian national team that beats Brazil, the #1 ranked nation in world football at the moment, which... once again, I'm not too sure how that ended up happening, considering the fact that Argentina both won the recent Copa America and World Cup. I don't know how that ranking worked out. But this Cameroonian national team, from defense to attack, is absolutely star-studded, even without Andre Onana as a goalkeeper. I do think Cameroon should have absolutely no problem here, and they should win this one 3-0, which, of course, ladies and gentlemen, takes us to our final game of round 3 of the Afcon qualifiers with Guinea versus Ethiopia. Now, of course, once again, Guinea is a team that has a lot of star players in their squad, but they never really seem to be performing at a level where they should be. A lot of the time, they have to rely on one or two individuals. We're looking at a nation like Ethiopia. Once again, at the recent Afcon and even in their recent qualifier game, they beat the likes of Egypt. They absolutely dominated the likes of Egypt, should I say. And versus a really struggling Guinea team, I do think Ethiopia will win this one, and I think they'll take it 1-0. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for my Afcon Round 3 qualifier predictions. Once again, if you did enjoy it, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like, and let me know if you disagree with any of the predictions I said. Once again, these are all opinion based, so if you guys do disagree, do make sure to let me know down below, and let me know your reasoning to why you disagree with me. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you for round 4 of the qualifier predictions, along with other videos. I'll see you all very, very soon. This has been Finn, FYNN. Have a good one. Cheers.